Well, what's up, everybody? I am so pumped to be here with you tonight across all of our campuses. Thank you for making it to church tonight. I know sometimes it takes effort, but you did it. I'm proud of you. You're here. It's awesome. And we are here for week 2 of the series that we have been calling Fresh. In this series, we're talking about what it looks like for us to take a fresh approach to life by trusting God with who we are and how we see and understand the world around us. Tonight, what we're going to talk about is what it looks like for us to have a fresh perspective. Your perspective is how you see and understand the world around you. Your perspective influences what you think is possible or what you can overcome or what you think you can't overcome. Your perspective matters. So a few years ago when I was in college, I started getting these headaches. I would wake up in the morning and I'd be kind of okay, and then by the middle to the end of the day, my eyeballs felt like they wanted to pop out of my head. And I was in college at the time, and so I was doing like a lot of reading and studying and paying attention in class and then falling asleep in class, but then suddenly waking up because you shouldn't be sleeping in class. You shouldn't be sleeping in class. Yeah, okay. But I did, but it just, the headaches made all of that worse. It just got in the way of my normal life, and so it made me very grumpy, and I would complain to my friends about my head hurting, and they were like, dude, could you just like go to the doctor or something? Stop talking to us about it. And I was like, no, it's just a headache. It'll go away by itself. And they were like, you're being dumb, and I just continued to ignore them until one day, my then girlfriend, who's now my wife, came up to me, and she was like, Brandon, you're being stupid. Go to the doctor. And I was like, you can't tell me what to do. And then the next day I went to the doctor, okay? And the doctor was like, bro, you need actually, I don't think he said bro. I'm not sure doctors are allowed to say that. But he was like, bro, you need glasses. And he said, you should have been wearing glasses for years. He actually said this, I can't believe how long you've gone without wearing glasses. So he gave me a prescription, and the next day I got some new frames. And by the end of the day, my headaches were completely gone. Like, not only could I actually see better, but the pain I had been putting myself through for years was over. See, here's my point. When we have a broken perspective, when we have a broken way of seeing and understanding the world around us, it leaves us with pain. When our perspective of ourselves is primarily being influenced by comparisons that we make through social media or friends at school, that leaves us with pain. When our perspective of what we think is possible in our life is influenced by our past or our mistakes or expectations that we set for ourselves that are way too high, it leaves us with pain. And when our expectations or when our perspective of God leaves us feeling guilty, ashamed, or like we're not enough for Him, that leaves us with pain. But sometimes all we need to do is get our sight checked. Sometimes what we really need in life is just a new way of seeing and understanding the world around us. We need a new perspective. And what I really believe tonight is we need this. We need a God-sized perspective. A God-sized perspective is when we allow God to lead us in our lives to a space of true understanding, where we really understand the distractions that we have in our life and where they lead us. We understand difficulties and how to get through them. We understand that when we make compromises, it only leaves us with pain. When we have a God-sized perspective, we are empowered to take a fresh approach to life. So tonight, we're gonna talk about how we gain a God-sized perspective. So there's this great story in the Bible. It's in the Old Testament out of this book called Daniel, about these 3 dudes, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Super weird names, but they have a great story, so hang with me, okay? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were captured when they were very young, and they were taken from their homeland to this enemy nation. And in this enemy nation, they were forced every single day to learn a new language, a new culture, and all the new customs of this enemy land. And you thought like your parents waking you up to go to school early in the morning was bad? Like this was really bad because they were forced every day to forget who they were and the God that they served in order to look more like this enemy nation. And this was a problem for them because they had a God-sized perspective. So they made kind of a pact between the 3 of them. They were not going to sacrifice that perspective. They were going to continue to see and understand the world around them from God's point of view, no matter what it cost them. But they had no idea what was ahead of them. Because what was ahead of them was this guy named King Nebuchadnezzar. Another super weird name, but hang with me, okay? Nebuchadnezzar was the biggest, baddest king of his day, and he wanted to flex bigger than anybody else. So what he did was he set up a 90-foot tall, solid gold statue of himself, and he put it in the middle of his kingdom. And then he invited all the most important people in the known world at the time to come together to watch and look at this amazing statue of himself, to bow down and worship to it, and then to post it on Instagram. Because if it's not on your story, it doesn't really happen, right? I'm not sure how that really works. But anyways, the point was to come together to worship this golden statue. And there were instructions. And the instructions went like this. Then the herald proclaimed, nations and peoples of every language, this is what you are commanded to do. As soon as you hear the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, pipe, and all other kinds of music, you must fall down and worship the image of gold that King Nebuchadnezzar has set up. Whoever does not fall down and worship will immediately be thrown into a blazing furnace. Okay, hold up. You know a party is about to turn up when someone plays the zither line, okay? Do you know what I'm saying? No, you don't, because we don't know what a zither is. Is it a made-up word? I'm not sure the Bible's allowed to do that, but I've never heard of that before, okay? The point was, when the music started to play, everybody in the crowd was supposed to bow down and worship this image. See, that was a problem for our boys because they had a God-sized perspective. They exclusively worshiped their God. They knew that they couldn't bow down, but they also knew what that was going to cost them, to be thrown into a blazing furnace and to end their life. But they decided to hold true to their perspective and to trust God and to not bow down. So the music plays, the zither is just ringing out. I don't know if this is how you play it, I don't know. But it's ringing out, everybody bows except for 3 dudes. Nebuchadnezzar sees them and is furious. He grabs them out of the crowd, brings them in front of the blazing hot furnace, and threatens to throw them in. And this is how Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego respond. They say this, King Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you in this matter. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to deliver us from it, and he will deliver us from your hand, your majesty. But even if he doesn't, we want you to know, your majesty, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold that you have set up. Okay, pause. These are 3 dudes from nobody. They are from nowhere. And they're talking to the biggest, baddest king of his day. Like, I could barely stand up to the bully on the playground. Where did these guys get their confidence from? It's like they were able to see something that was real and true, but no one else could perceive. They had a God-sized perspective. See, because they knew something about God. They knew that God was not a statue, unable to move or speak. They knew that the God that they serve, the God that we are talking about here right now, shows up for the people that he cares about. That he enters into difficult situations and he stays with us in the flames of life. That confidence only comes with a God-sized perspective. But let me pause here and ask, what are you up against right now? What are the furnaces in your life? See, all of us have things in our life that are begging us to compromise, begging us to throw out faith and replace it with fear. What is that for you? For some of us, if we were honest, it's who we're dating. They're encouraging us to do stuff that makes us uncomfortable, that we know it's a line that we shouldn't cross. But it's just easier to go along with it and compromise. For others of us, it's our friendships. We have friends that constantly peer pressure us into situations that go way beyond what we're comfortable doing, or even dishonor God, the God that we're trying to serve. But once again, it's just easier to go along with it instead of being the weird person out. And for others of us, man, it's what we spend our time looking at online and how that influences the way that we see and treat the people in our lives. See, all of these compromises, they come with promises. Promises that we'll feel we'll feel cool, we'll feel accepted if we just give in. It'll be easier. But the truth is, these compromises never deliver on what they offer. See, they offer us promises, but they leave us with pain. See, God also offers us a promise. And that promise is that he is always with us, that he never leaves us, and that he is by our side in the midst of the flames of our life. And that was certainly true for Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, because King Nebuchadnezzar did throw them into the furnace. They did go into the fire. And King Nebuchadnezzar thought that would be their end. But he was wrong. Let's see how the story ends. After King Nebuchadnezzar threw them in, he leapt to his feet in amazement and asked his advisors, weren't there 3 men that we tied up and threw into the fire? They replied, yes, your majesty. He said, look, I see 4 men walking around in there, unbound and unharmed, and the 4th looks like a son of the gods. Nebuchadnezzar then approached the opening of the blazing furnace and shouted, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out, come here. So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came out of the fire. I imagine them walking out like this. They walked out of the fire. They were in the midst of an impossible situation. They stared down the biggest, baddest king of their day. They stared down an actual furnace because they had confidence in God. They knew that God was bigger than their furnace. They had a God-sized perspective that let them know that God was with them, that he loved them, that there was no furnace, there was no threat, there was nothing in the world too dangerous, too scary to make them want to compromise that kind of relationship with God. And friends, I need that kind of confidence in my life. Because on a daily basis, I'm faced with opportunities to compromise my faith, to throw it out the window, to walk away, to just do something easier. And if I'm honest, a lot of the time I do. I compromise my peace. I compromise my sanity. I compromise my inner safety because it seems like it'll be easier to just do that. I let distractions cloud my vision and keep me from a God-sized perspective. What about you? Do you ever feel beat up, burnt up by the furnaces in your life? Well, what if we didn't allow those to intimidate us anymore? What if we had a perspective that set us free and allowed us to face our furnaces with faith instead of fear? Friends, we can do that. Tonight, we can change our perspective and allow God to show us the truth of things. And that truth is that he is bigger than any problem, any distraction, any disaster that we will ever face. But here's the truth. Wanting a new perspective and actually seeing the world in a different way are 2 totally different things. So before we end our time tonight, I want to give you one way that you can practice this week to have a bigger and better perspective, a God-sized perspective. And it's in these 2 words, think bigger. So I hate it when I go to Chipotle. Pause. I love going to Chipotle. Just let me finish the sentence, okay? I hate it when I go to Chipotle and I make the perfect burrito, okay? Just imagine, double wrapped, just all the fixings. It's scrumptious, making your mouth water. And then you get to the end of the burrito making line and you find out that they are out of guacamole. Like, how does that happen? How does Chipotle, the like American dream of guacamole, just run out of guacamole? Chipotle without guacamole is like an entire nation losing its dream or a person losing their soul. Like, I might be overreacting, but I really don't think that I am, okay? So one time I go into Chipotle, this is a true story, with my wife. They were out of guac. I was devastated. So I begin to pout, okay, which is the only appropriate way to respond when they're out of guacamole. But of course, you gotta be nice. They're like, oh, can I have some guacamole? And like, oh, we're out. We're like, oh. And you kind of look at them with anger, but you gotta be nice because you're a Christian, you know? They're out of guac, I begin to pout, and my wife begins to look at me like, hey, could you please stop acting like a child? And I'm like, hey, no, I won't, because this is the worst thing ever, okay? And then she finally asked me, she's like, what's the big deal? Like, what's the big deal about guacamole? And I said, guac makes the burrito. And she paused, and she said, no, it doesn't. You make the burrito. Just hang with me. She said, you make the burrito. If Chipotle running out of guacamole ruins the possibility of your burrito, then your perspective on what a burrito can be is too small. And I was like, dang, I'm gonna put that in a message someday. And I just did. So listen, okay, we can clap for that. It's great. I agree, my wife is awesome. Here's the deal, here's my point, okay? Here's my point. Sometimes in life, one thing will go wrong. And it will completely ruin our perspective on reality. Sometimes it's big, sometimes it's small. Sometimes it's we didn't get the part we wanted in the play. Sometimes it's we didn't make the team. Sometimes it's we failed a class, we failed a test, we failed a paper. Sometimes they're bigger, like a bad diagnosis from a doctor, or a divorce in the family, or a friend that betrayed you. But whatever it is, whatever the disappointment or the distraction may be in your life, it does not have to ruin your perspective. Why? Because you can think bigger. I mean, that's what Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego did. They were faced with the most impossible situation I can even imagine. And they were able to step back and realize that even though that furnace would have taken their life, that it was not bigger than what God was able to do for them. They were able to step back and remember that God was bigger than their problems. But notice this, just because Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego had a God-sized perspective, that did not mean that God swooped in before they were thrown into the furnace and rescued them, did he? They still went into the fire, but it was in the flames that God met them. Here's the deal, friends. We're still gonna go through really tough times in our life. If you haven't yet, you will, probably someday. But I'm telling you, do not let that moment ruin your perspective on who God is and on what he wants to do in your life. Instead, realize that it's in those moments that God shows up for us. Most of the time, he shows up in real, tangible ways for us. It's in the flames of our life that God makes himself known. And not only that, but he walks us out of the fire too. So this week, when things go wrong, tomorrow, when things go wrong, when Chipotle is out of guacamole, think bigger. Step back and remember that God is bigger than your problem. Remember that he is with you in the flames of life. And don't throw your perspective out the window. Guys, life has so many disappointments. It has so many distractions. And if we have the wrong perspective, we'll end up just paying way more attention to our pain. That's why we need a God-sized perspective. That's why we need to be able to view the world through his point of view. Because when we do, there is nothing that can keep us down. There is nothing that will destroy us. So this week, let's be like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Let's look into our difficult situations and our problems and our disasters and see God waiting for us in the midst of it. Let's take our disappointment and trade it for the destiny that God has for all of us. This week, may all of us, across all of our campuses, put on a God-sized perspective and think bigger than any problem that comes our way. Let's pray together. I'm gonna close. Jesus, man, I trust you, Lord. I rely on you. I want to see the world through your eyes, God, because there is nothing too impossible for you. There is no obstacle, there is no furnace that you will not overcome or meet us inside of, Lord. I pray for all of my friends that are really going through really tough times right now, that they're confused and they're heartbroken or they feel lost. God, I pray that you would show up for them and that they would have the courage this week to see the world in a different way. And they would trust you, Lord, to think bigger and use it as an opportunity to take a fresh approach in their life. God, I thank you for what you're doing in all of our hearts and all of our lives. Pray that you would continue it. We trust you. We love you. In Christ's name, amen. Thanks, guys. See you next week.